To fake Wall Street's greatest turnaround, he had to invent the numbers. He was the most feared CEO in America. His book was a bestseller, and in 1997, he posted a record $189 million profit that Wall Street worshipped. Roughly a third of it did not exist. So how does the toughest man on Wall Street fake the greatest comeback of the decade? And how does he get caught? We can answer that using the SEC's own complaint and the audit records it left behind. When the lie finally broke, the stock didn't dip. It collapsed. Shareholders lost, in the SEC's own words, billions of dollars. But the billion-dollar number is the consequence. This is the story of the machine that made it. 3 accounting tricks, a warehouse full of unsold grills, and 1 analyst who did the math while everyone else cheered. 1995. Al Dunlap walks off the Scott paper deal about $100 million richer. He had taken a struggling paper giant, fired 11,000 people, and sold what was left to Kimberly-Clark. The stock had soared. To Wall Street, that made him a genius, the man who could turn any dying company into cash. To the workers, he was a wrecking ball, and he loved it. He posed for photographers in an ammunition belt, called himself Rambo in pinstripes, and put his own face on a best-selling book. He earned a nickname he adored, Chainsaw. July 1996. A dying appliance maker called Sunbeam needs a savior. The board hires Chainsaw, and the stock jumps almost 50% the day they announce him, before he has done a single thing. Then he does exactly what they paid for. He unveils a restructuring so brutal it makes headlines. He will cut about half the workforce. Thousands of jobs gone. He shutters factories, kills product lines, and installs his own money man, Russell Kersh, over the finances. Wall Street cheers louder. Therefore, the board believes it has bought a miracle. But there is a problem Dunlap already knows about, and it's hiding inside his own numbers. Here's the trap he'd walked into. You cannot cut your way to growth forever. Fire everyone, close everything, and eventually there's nothing left to cut. And Wall Street stops clapping for cost-cutting and starts demanding real growing profit. Dunlap had built his entire legend on one thing: numbers that go up every quarter, no excuses. Therefore, when Sunbeam's actual business refused to grow, he faced the choice that defines this whole story. Fix the company or fix the books. He chose the books. And the first trick runs completely backwards. Most fraudsters make a bad year look good. Dunlap's team did the opposite. They made a bad year look worse. In late 1996, before the real fraud even started, Kersh and the controller quietly padded Sunbeam's losses with excess reserves. Accountants have a name for money stashed away for later: cookie jar reserves. Sunbeam filled that jar to the brim, deepening the 1996 hole on purpose. Why sabotage your own numbers? Because a deeper hole makes the climb out look miraculous. In 1997, they simply reached back into that jar and poured the reserves into income. Nothing had been earned. It had only been moved from one year to the next. A 1996 loss, dressed up as a 1997 comeback. Fraud that runs in reverse. We open files like this every week. Subscribe so the next one reaches you. Because this was only the first trick, and the next 2 are how the lie got big enough to fool Wall Street. Then came trick 2, bill and hold. Sunbeam booked full sales for barbecue grills that customers hadn't actually taken. Grills that never left Sunbeam's own warehouses. Billed today, delivered someday, revenue on the books, product on the shelf. And trick 3, channel stuffing. Sunbeam offered retailers deep discounts to place next year's orders now, bribing the future to pay for the present. Stack all 3 tricks together, and you get the headline the whole street worshipped: a record $189 million profit. But according to the SEC, at least $60 million of it, about a third, was pure invention. That is the lie. Not a bad quarter. A machine built to manufacture profit out of nothing. Now here's the uncomfortable part, and it's the part most telling skip. Sunbeam really was a mess. It really was bloated, unfocused, losing money on products nobody wanted. Dunlap's core logic wasn't insane. Cut the dead weight, focus what's left, answer to the shareholder above all. In a business that is genuinely dying, someone does have to make the ruthless call, and most executives are too afraid to make it. For one brief window, Dunlap looked like the only adult in the room. The problem was never that he cut. The problem was what he did next. But cutting is not the same as building. And Sunbeam's real business was not growing. It was shrinking under grills that never sold. Therefore, the fake profit needed to get bigger every quarter just to stay believable. A lie that has to keep running until someone stops to check the math. March 1998. This is the summit. The stock hits an all-time high, $52 a share. In a single day, Dunlap announces 3 acquisitions at once, promising to build an empire out of the company he'd just gutted. Fortune magazine had already crowned him again. The market roars its approval. Everyone is buying. And it is, though no one knows it yet, the last good day Sunbeam will ever have. One man wasn't cheering. Andrew Shore was a consumer products analyst at Payne Weber, and he kept getting stuck on one number that made no sense. Barbecue grills, flying off Sunbeam's books in the dead of winter. Nobody buys a grill in January, so Shore asked the question everyone else was too busy celebrating to ask: where are all these grills actually going? The answer was nowhere. They were sitting in warehouses, sold only on paper. Shore did the arithmetic the whole street had skipped. And early one April morning, the very morning of Sunbeam's quarterly earnings call, he downgraded the stock. He was the first voice on Wall Street to say it out loud. The turnaround is fake. So, genius or fraud? The comments are open. Because Wall Street's smartest money had just split into 2 camps. Inside Sunbeam, panic. The returns Shore had predicted came flooding back. Real customers sending real grills back to real warehouses. So the officers took what the SEC would later call increasingly desperate measures. They booked even more phantom sales, and, the SEC alleges, they began deleting company records to hide the merchandise coming back. Dunlap reportedly grabbed one doubter by the shoulder and snarled that he'd come after him twice as hard. The tough guy was cornered, and a cornered bully makes mistakes. June 13th, 1998. The Boardroom. The press won't stop asking about the numbers, so the board launches its own investigation. And the comptroller tells them Dunlap had pushed the finance team to push the limits of the accounting rules. Dunlap walks in and tries to wave the whole collapse away. He calls it a transition year. Nobody buys it. Then Charles Elson, a governance expert, and a director Dunlap himself had appointed, moves to terminate him. The vote is unanimous. The man who built an entire career firing other people is fired in a matter of minutes, and the board moves to strip the roughly $35 million golden parachute he was counting on walking away with. Then came the receipts. Sunbeam was forced to restate its numbers quarter by quarter, all the way back to 1996. And as it did, the phantom turnaround simply vanished off the page. The miracle profit had never existed. Meanwhile, the debt from Dunlap's 3 trophy acquisitions was still very real and very due. Crushed under it on February 6, 2001, Sunbeam Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company Chainsaw was hired to save, he had helped destroy, May 2001. The SEC sues, headline, Massive Financial Fraud. And it names more than Dunlap. It names the Arthur Andersen audit partner who signed off on the clean opinions. The watchdog, the SEC said, had helped the fraud pass, September 4th, 2002. The settlement. Dunlap admits nothing, denies nothing, but he is banned for life from ever running a public company again and writes the SEC a check for $500,000. The toughest CEO in America, permanently benched. But here's the twist this whole story has been building toward. Who actually paid for the lie? Not Dunlap. He kept his fortune and settled the shareholder lawsuits for a fraction of it, around $15 million on the class action, some $18.5 million across everything. Not Ronald Perlman, the financier who'd sold Sunbeam a company for stock. He lost on the shares then turned around and won a $1.45 billion verdict against his own bankers. The people who were actually wiped out, all the way to zero, were the small shareholders who believed the miracle. As the New York Times put it, plainly, Mr. Perlman and Mr. Dunlap have reason to smile now. Small investors who believed in them do not. Sunbeam wasn't the end of something. It was the overture. Within 3 years, the same audit firm, Arthur Andersen, would sign off on Enron and cease to exist. PBS called the Sunbeam episode bigger than Enron. It was the warning shot nobody heeded. And the myth Dunlap perfected, it never died. The genius CEO whose story outruns the numbers, we meet him again and again. Theranos, we work. Every single time, someone did the math early, said the numbers don't add up, and got ignored until it was too late. Andrew Shore was simply the first of a type. To fake Wall Street's greatest turnaround, Dunlap had to invent the numbers. The only question worth asking is who's inventing them right now, and who's already done the math. Every genius CEO Wall Street ever worshipped has a file like this one. We open a new one every week. The next name is already on the table.